Are you willing to just be that good Samaritan? It's my favorite story in the Bible because it really highlights how easy it is to step onto the other side of the road. I see it happening from people who are very wealthy and want to tell me, I'll do it tomorrow. I got a memo that shocked me to the core that basically said, you know what, Nick, you're not guaranteed tomorrow.
Hello, this is Simon Guilbeault, and we've got another episode of Inspired, and I'm super thrilled to have a fantastic guest as usual this week, and his name is Nick Jordan, and he's in California. How are you doing, Nick?
Good morning to you, Simon.
Great to have you, brother. Nick is the founder, CEO of Wells of Life, and we actually crossed paths in 2008. And since then, he's done incredible stuff. And through his team and people, they've managed to bring clean water to 700,000 people. So we're going to get to that later on in the podcast. But Nick, you're in California. I'm supping a mug here of hot cocoa because it's so cold. It's been raining. Whereas you're, in the glorious sunshine. I'm a bit jealous of you. But from your accent, clearly you're not from California. You're not American, are you? So tell us where you're from and give us a bit of background.
Well, I certainly share the same climate as you, Simon, for 28 years. From County Wexford, born and raised to a farming family, and became a school teacher. And from there, I emigrated. But I indeed spent 28 glorious years in Ireland, and they did not ask for me to surrender my accent at the border, so to speak. And so I still speak pretty much as if I'm from the farm. So that's kind of the origins of my beginning.
And so what, you were literally, your parents were farmers, or what was your background there?
Yes, my father and mother, Aidan and Margaret Jordan, were farmers, mixed farm in County Wexford, typical farming life. Became intimate with the picking of potatoes pretty early. And I just as early found out that I really didn't have a farming future, and made plans to get away from the farm as quickly as I possibly could, believing that there were other ways to make a living.
So was it a difficult teenage years, were you having to work hard on the farm as well as schoolwork, or did you quickly branch out and do different stuff?
Well, I suppose looking back, I was the oldest of 5 children. I believe I had a little bit of a setback early on in that I was what we called spoiled. I guess being the oldest, that might be natural enough. They did give me a middle name of Pius, which put a little bit of pressure on a young man, I believe. Being the oldest from a farming family, it was quite natural at that point to be sent to boarding school. So in the late 70s, I was sent to a boarding school, St. Peter's College in County Wexford.
So you are a businessman, or you've spent a lot of your years in business. Was that quickly apparent that was going to be the track you're going to go down?
Certainly was not. Absolutely not. It would have been what we would call quite a meandering road to find different paths. I did, as I said, become a school teacher, and that was quite normal and easy. I guess, being totally honest with you, I would not have ever considered myself an academic. I think I had what we now know as ADD growing up, had some difficulty concentrating. I didn't make any records with grades and kind of struggled through. I would say at best I was a B student, but I did love teaching. I certainly loved the practical side of it, and eventually passed enough exams to get a Bachelor of Education. Main degree was in English and of course in education, and became a school teacher in Dublin. And I would say I had 4 of the best years of my life in the classroom. I absolutely loved the opportunity to be able to instill knowledge rather than education in boys' minds. Even this many years later, with the miracle of Facebook, I still get young men that have families of their own tracking me down and still insisting on calling me Mr. Jordan, which I find quite humorsome. But those were 4 great years.
And so why did you stop if you're having such a good time doing that?
Well, in reference to what you said earlier, I got tired looking out my classroom window and seeing another day of rain and just bemoaning the fact that there has got to be another option, a better climate. And, we did have a television set, back then, like a lot of people. I do believe at a certain point in time, we actually even got a color TV.
Wow.
But I saw these shows from America, which were glorious. And I could recount a few of them that you might even remember: Dallas and Chips and
I
the
wasn't
Brady
allowed to
Bunch.
watch
And
Dallas.
okay, well, I have a little story for about Dallas for you a little later on, which actually was really the signpost that pointed me in the direction of Texas. But that's the answer to the question. I really wanted to go beyond Ireland. And, seeing a lot of my colleagues in the classroom, 20 and 30 years in teaching, some of them still sort of wearing the same garb, I couldn't see myself being in that position for a couple of decades. And I guess I kind of decided early on I wanted to spread my wings further afield.
So, what opportunity presented itself for you to spread your wings?
A couple of summers prior to emigrating, my brother and I took the summer off and went to America. First 2 years, we went to Chicago. Again, they are amazing years because we were so naive. We literally had no clue what we were doing, but I think God kind of protected us and pointed us in the right direction. We worked with some really rough crews and the south side of Chicago. And, there's many instances where honestly, if God hadn't been watching over us, I don't think we would have ever come home to Ireland. But we got a taste for the American way of life. I think we
Mm-hmm.
discovered McDonald's and a few other things. But the final year, we went to Texas, and that's as a result of watching the soap Dallas, hearing about JR, and again, naively thinking that, hey, we might even get a job on an oil rig, if you can imagine that silliness. So in 1986, we packed our one suitcase and headed off to Houston, Texas.
Fantastic. And so landed on your feet straight away, or was it a disaster?
I wouldn't call it a disaster, but let's just say we met a wonderful American gentleman and his wife on the flight who, after hearing about 5 minutes of our conversation, I think immediately realized, oh boy, these two guys are headed for a world of trouble. So he, at the time, gave us his business card. Of course, we were haughtily telling him that we were fine. We would be getting a job, but after 3 days and the money ran out, we grabbed that card very quickly. We contacted Mr. James Kelly, who has been a lifelong friend, thankfully. And he invited us to be his house guest for the summer of 86. And I don't have to tell you, Simon, that was like the glorious welcome of a wealthy American. And so, of course, we started at the top. And should I say, very few people stay at the top. So that just happened to be my introduction in 86.
It's what a great guy, isn't it? I mean, I cycled across America, so 100 plus miles a day for 5 weeks back in 2012, and we went the southern tier. So we didn't go through Dallas, we went through Houston, and the hospitality, southern hospitality that we experienced from people that did not know us, never met us, it was absolutely phenomenal. As a Brit, I mean, I just wish, it was a challenge. I'm not saying all Americans are that hospitable, but that hospitality we experienced was phenomenal. And you can make key connections, can't you, along the way in your life that you can point to and say that that person was part of setting a trajectory for me. And what I love is that all of us actually have that capacity, don't we, to be that for somebody else. And I want to be that to as many people as possible, just meeting them, encourage them, helping them launch out to achieve what they want to do in any given situation. So do you look back and see him as a key linchpin in your life?
Yes, I really do. I look back and see, first of all, what you just said is so correct. The welcome that he provided. Again, I just know that I wouldn't be here today. I'm sure Wells of Life wouldn't be in existence. There's so much of my life wouldn't have turned out the way it turned had he not taken the time. And really, he just had such an appreciation for a couple of Irish guys that he took the time to invest in and did it joyfully. We didn't feel that there was any effort on his part. And as I said, we became friends. We attended his 80th birthday recently. He's come to Ireland several times. And so, all of that pointed me in the direction of where I eventually landed, which was after going home and telling my poor parents that I was emigrating, again, breaking up with the girl that I was dating and packing two suitcases. And in 1986, I basically decided that this was where I was going to be in Houston. Got a job working on a dude ranch. Again, it's a quite easy job in the sense that there's not a lot of physical labor, but I worked on a dude ranch for the first half of 1986. And that was my start essentially in America.
And then fast forward, you got into real estate. Well, what was that journey like? How did you manage that?
Quickly found out that the price of oil at the time really determined the economy of Texas. In 1987, I essentially had finished my time in Texas. I had one phone number from a dear friend of mine, a teaching colleague. I managed to call that number and very quickly insisted that the gentleman on the other end of the phone was going to have me as his house guest. I essentially moved to California. The O'Connor family, again, took me in, gave me some direction. I can't, in the interest of time, I couldn't even start to tell you how many years it took to get to real estate. Suffice to say, this was 1987. I think I did every odd job and job that I could find to keep myself alive, because the streets were not paved with gold, as I had been told. The welcome in California was not as welcoming as I had received in Texas. And I really struggled. It was a tough time, very lonely. And it's tough to convince your parents that there's a reason why you're actually struggling in California when you really had a job, a life trajectory that was headed, in the direction of being a school principal at one point. But there is one thing that happened, Simon, that really made a huge difference. And it happened in Texas. And I'm just thinking back on it now for a second because, again, I was raised Catholic. I went to a convent school and it was a wonderful education. I mean, the nuns were incredible. They were so, service orientated, so committed to education. And I kind of took that, education with me to America, but I did not bring a Catholic faith. And be totally honest with you, I really didn't, because it wasn't a faith that I believed had really any application to my life. But I'm having a humble supper, should I say, in my little guest house, and I'm kind of paying attention to what's on one of the 5 channels. And I see this man, and he's standing at a pulpit, and he's speaking in such a crystal clear voice. And as I slowly start to pay more attention, I realized that it's Billy Graham. Very strong voice, but a very soft message. And I realized that he was talking about Jesus. And I realized he was talking about having a personal relationship with Jesus. And none of this really made a lot of sense to me because I had no background in hearing about having a personal relationship with Jesus. And at the end, I saw him patiently fold his arms. And this was a stadium, maybe 45,000 people. And people started to flock and walk down in droves to the front. I know I was so touched and moved by what I saw that it made a profound difference. Unfortunately, being a very stubborn Irishman, it managed to take another 21 years before I actually finally accepted and fully embraced that invitation. And that kind of fills in a fair point and fair amount of my life in California, those 21 years.
So give us a quick range of jobs that you plowed your way through.
Right. So really what I did was after 6 years, of that overnight success thing, after 6 years of struggle, I finally realized, and somebody that I knew and respected me in the direction that said, Nick, if you really are going to make it in America, you need to, 1, work for yourself, and 2, you need to use whatever skills you have, which, trust me, school teaching was not something that was in a big demand in America. So I basically got an invitation to work in real estate. And very quickly, I climbed the ladder within that profession to own company in a beautiful town called Laguna Beach, about 1999. And from there, I really excelled. And it was as a result of the time when interest rates were low, just hit the market at the right time. I built a company. I believe in our last year of business, we did about $80 million worth of business, which putting in terms of success was pretty good. I was working in what we call the high end of real estate. One of my best clients was a man that would be known to many listeners as Clint Eastwood. Wonderful man. Not that many people can actually say that they did business with this wonderful man, but I did. Those were the successful financial years of my life in America.
But that came at a certain cost, did it?
Having kind of reached the ripe old age of 43, realizing that I had a high level of financial success. I was a millionaire. I lived in a beautiful home overlooking the ocean in Laguna Beach. I kind of thought I had achieved the American dream, which to some people's qualification would have been true. I married, and we had several years of what I would call to be a wonderful life based on wealth, finances, and the like. But just to be totally transparent, this was not a marriage that was ever going to work. Neither of us knew the Lord. Both of us were very driven by success and by monetary wealth. And unfortunately, 2 things happened in 2007. and both of them proved to be catastrophic. One, there was a real estate crash that very many people are well aware of because it affected them. But two, more importantly for my personal life, that's when I went through a divorce. And, I was just looking at a couple of remembrances recently. And 2007 was a year that my life could have gone in either direction. I say that because when you get hit by a financial recession and your whole life is built on finances without a solid foundation, and when you go through a financial, basically a divorce that is going to take a lot of your finances, and you have two little boys that are 2 and 4, and it turns out to be a custody battle, that is the roughest storm that any person go through. And believe me, it was a howling gale that pretty much almost destroyed me.
So how come it didn't destroy you then?
So during 2005, 6, and 7, running a real estate business in Laguna Beach, I had many opportunities and many well-to-do clients. I received an invitation from Trevor Stevenson, who is the CEO and founder of Fields of Life, to help build a school in Uganda. Now, I knew nothing about Uganda. I couldn't have even found it on a map at the time. But I did like the idea of dedicating a school to a person whose life had a significance. So for those years, we had fundraisers, and we actually raised the funds for 3 schools. Then in 2007, everything changed. Financial markets changed, and I find myself in the early stages of a divorce. Well, I received a phone call late at night, just early on in the time I was going through the divorce. It was a friend of mine who was a minister of the gospel. She was from Uganda, actually an African princess, Evelyn Komantale. And it was frankly, it was a bothersome phone call because it was kind of getting late in the evening and I really didn't wish to speak with anyone, had a rough day. And she asked me a couple of words that have sort of stayed with me. She said, "Can I pray for you?" And I, being polite, said, "Sure." And 45 minutes later, find myself on my knees beside my bed with tears streaming down my face, realizing I have a choice to make. And I see what the road ahead looks like. I see it's going to be a very tough time through this divorce, and I'm probably going to lose all of my financial wealth. And I realized that if I didn't accept the invitation to put God at the center of my life and give my life to Him, I wasn't going to make it. And that was an easy choice. So on the 27th of April, 2007, I became a believer and truly accepted the Lord Jesus as my Savior. And that invitation was the one invitation that changed my life.
So, I mean, personal life is still carnage at that stage, but did sort of peace flood into your heart? Did the problems resolve? I mean, was it a very acrimonious divorce? You had the kids to juggle in the mix.
Everybody mentions their divorce, Simon, and nobody has a good story to tell. Mine was definitely what you would call a train wreck. Anytime you have 2 little boys, 2 and 4, and their future is on the line, ex-wife decides that she wants to move back to Ireland, and you're seeing a huge divide of 5,000 miles between you and your children. That's about as difficult as it can be. So I knew that was going to be a real big challenge. Becoming a believer didn't change a thing, but it did bring a little bit of a long-term perspective because I began attending church, an amazing local church here that would have been basically what we believed to be an evangelical church. Mm-hmm. And I was among a group of believers where worship was so important, and in those early minutes of worship that sometimes went on for 45 minutes, I really saw a lot of pain disappear. A lot of the challenges, were put into their different place. And I had an invitation to be able to spend time in worship that really, I believe, saved my life.
So how did that affect your life priorities moving forward?
I realized very quickly that all of the financial responsibilities were going to have to take second place because I wanted to be a father at all costs. And I realized being a father from California to Ireland was going to bring a certain amount of challenges. So I essentially put my real estate career on hold. And for 4 years, I commuted back and forth to Ireland 32 times, brought the boys back to California for Christmas, for Easter, for summer, and did the best I could, in a very difficult situation to always be there for them, never missed a birthday. I even dressed up as Batman once and arrived in Ireland as a surprise for one of their birthdays. If you can imagine that, a guy in a rental car with a Batman costume driving down the country roads. That's quite a funny image that the boys, even to this day, still remind me of. Dad, do you remember the time you wore the Batman costume?
Yeah.
You know, very, very quickly, believe it or not, those 4 years passed. But while those 4 years were passing, I actually got to go to Uganda. And I really need to be able to share with you because that essentially is where you and I met. And in 2008, my business was essentially almost non existent. I received a phone call from Trevor Stevenson asking if I would like to travel to Uganda and see some of the schools that I had helped raise the funding for. And in fact, to lay the foundation stone of the Ford School, which was a memorial school in memory of my late sister Joan, who had passed in 2000 from cancer. So I willingly accepted the invitation, but I would have to say that I was not a happy person at the time. I was really struggling, and I was really in a very dark place. So I went to Uganda, and I pretty much said, I'm going to just quietly go through this country and see what there is to see. I arrived in Burundi. Of course, that was a shocker. I had never in my life seen the poverty that exists and probably still exists for the most part in Burundi. That's where you and I had an opportunity to meet. I got to see you preach, and I haven't seen that many people preach in a raggedy tent, you know, on a dirt lot that people are so engaged in. And that's a memory that definitely stayed with me. The words that you preached, I can't remember. The passion that you preached with, I've never forgotten. The way that you connected those of us there to the gospel and to the message and infused it into our everyday life, that was a seed that got planted. And that's all I can say. So I went from Burundi through Rwanda and into Uganda. And over the course of 2.5 weeks, I saw poverty like I had never seen. And slowly I could see my own pain starting to ebb. I saw children in school that I could tell were sick because they were drinking dirty water. I remembered back, believe it or not, to my early years as a 4-year-old child growing up in Ireland. For the first 4 years of my life, we did not have running water, as they call it. There was a well about a quarter of a mile from the house that my mother would walk every day to and carry 2 galvanized buckets from for the family's needs. On many occasions, I accompanied my mother to this well away from the farmhouse, and I was conscious of how heavy water was. And when she would leave the buckets down to rest, remember that this was a difficult task. And many years later in Uganda, I see mothers, and I'm also seeing my mother in that same situation. They're carrying water. The stress and the struggle is quite noticeable. And I believe that's really when I had a Holy Spirit moment or encounter. And that was something that by the source of the Nile in 2008, I was given an invitation to do something about the lack of water in Uganda.
So you went back to the States and you just, boom, you started Wells of Life, or what did that look like?
I had a day before I flew back from Entebbe, stayed at the Fields of Life guest house. And during that day, I essentially wrote for hours what I think was just a stream of consciousness, a whole lot of ideas, which essentially formed the framework and the business plan for what became known as Wells of Life. Yes, I went back to California in 2009. I really had no idea what I was going to do. I tried to get back in, of course, into my core business, which was real estate, but I couldn't get Uganda out of my mind. I couldn't get the children out of my mind's eye, and I couldn't just put it away. I kept thinking about the people I had met, and I kept thinking about what I could see was poverty. The taste, the feel, the smell, everything was still alive and stayed alive long after I'd returned. And I guess I eventually made the decision that I couldn't put it out of my mind, that I needed to do something about it. Because I'd heard so many stories about poverty and people suffering and people talking about it, but not so many people doing much about it. I made a decision in 2009 that I needed to do something about it, and I had no idea what that was. And I began to pray, to ask the Lord, what is it that a guy from real estate could possibly do for a country that is 9,000 miles away and well beyond my sphere of influence? And I guess the answer came pretty clear. And that was bring them water. It didn't come with any instructions. It didn't come with any memo. But again, if you want to find something or if you want to do something, I believe you'll find a way. And so with Trevor Stevenson's help at Fields of Life, we essentially agreed to buy a drilling rig. And that essentially was the beginning of Wells of Life, which took a very long time, a lot of work, a lot of effort, to build this Christian ministry into what it is today. But that's when it all began, back in 2009, with a desire to bring water in Jesus' name to those in need.
Hi folks, I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you are, it'd be great if you shared it with as many of your mates as possible so that other people get to hear about it. And listen, if you would like to support our work in Burundi, which is the hungriest country in the world, I'd love support there too. You can do that by going to greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. Now let's get back to the podcast.
Beautiful. And within a short space of time, you had someone key come alongside you in your life. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. Well, Simon, as a lot of people will attest to, when you go through a divorce, you find that you're definitely scarred. And I will just say that I was not interested in getting back into a relationship anytime soon. I was so scarred that I was actually quite happy to go in the opposite direction and not ever marry again. I simply wanted to be a dad to my two sons, to raise them and do the best I could. But again, you hear it many times. If you really want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Of course, I had told him my plans. And well, on the 3rd of, I believe, July 2011, he definitely laughed because a lady walked in to my home. We were having a small fundraiser for Wells of Life. The church I attended had very generously supported it. This very beautiful lady wearing a pair of black slacks, some high heel shoes, a polka dot top. I say that because this story has gone down as legend at this point in Wells of Life, came to the fundraiser. And really, I did no more than just sort of give a cursory glance and an acknowledgement. I did notice that she was quite generous and she had bid on quite a few auction items. And I guess that was about as much attention as I had paid. What I didn't know was that a dear friend of ours who was a pastor at the same church had given this lady, whose name is Michelle, a certain directive that said, please help this poor guy. He is in need of a lot of help. In fact, I'm not sure he's actually going to make it if somebody doesn't come alongside him because he's really struggling. Well, I believe Michelle took that memo pretty seriously. And over the course of perhaps a year, we ended up going to church. We got to know each other a little bit better, and I was still quite hesitant. But at a certain point, I realized, this is a lady, a woman, a person that I truly can see myself spending the rest of my life with. And, I'm a very wise man when it comes to picking the right people second time round. And I eventually popped the question. And thankfully, Michelle, who probably didn't see that I had more baggage than, several U-Hauls, said yes, and realized that she was definitely getting herself into what would become an interesting life. She promised to be on the board of Wells of Life for a year. I can't remember at this point. This must be her 11th year. And I guess what happened was I fell in love with somebody who was more in love with the Lord than she was with me. And she told me that on the first occasion that I needed to get into the right order of where I would be in her life. And again, I knew what was being offered. I also knew that that was something that I really wanted to do because I never had a relationship with somebody who truly loved the Lord, who understood she starts every day, with an hour of prayer time. And I was inspired that her faith was what made her the lady that she is. And slowly but surely, I began to learn enough to realize that by spending time in prayer with the Lord, it just galvanized me to the point where I could get through some of the storms. And progressively, life got easier. My ex-wife did decide that the grass was not greener in Ireland, and it still rained just as much. She moved back to America, to North Carolina, and immediately cut my commute in half. So instead of 5,000 miles of a journey, my journey went down to 2,200 miles. And for the next several years, all I had to do was commute to North Carolina for the first 10 days of every single month. Rent an Airbnb, rent a car, take the boys to school, take them to their soccer games, to baseball games, and essentially be a dad for the first days of each month. And that is what changed everything when it comes to parenting. My oldest son will be 17 soon. He attends Capistrano Valley Christian School. He's an outstanding student. He's a good soccer player. We have a wonderful relationship. He absolutely adores Michelle, vice versa. My younger son is 15. He spends every summer, Christmas, Easter, and a lot of times in between here. I'm hopeful, prayerful, and optimistic that he'll follow in his older brother's footsteps. And there's peace within the Jordan household.
That is terrific. Well, listen, as we move towards a close, there's some key bits. I mean, I'd love to hear a few, fantastic transformational stories through the ministry of Wells of Life, and give us a few stats as well in the mix.
Sure. What I've always been amazed about is that when timing works, everything goes easily. I've met some incredible people through the ministry. In 2013, I'm attending a St. Patrick's Day party, which would not be unusual for an Irish guy on the 17th of March. I met a man called Peter Callahan, a very esteemed attorney who had some level of interest in making a donation to Wells of Life. However, he led me to believe that if what I told him about Wells of Life, as far as a water well, was not there after he traveled to Uganda, he would return and use his law firm to throw me in jail and to shut down Wells of Life.
Brilliant.
And that all happened in the first 5 minutes of meeting him. Let's just say I was a little bit put on my back foot. And he sort of pointed at me and said, "So what do you think of that?" And all I could say was, "Holy Spirit, can you please give me the right words to say here?" And I said, "Well, so when would you like to go to Uganda?" And that thankfully cued his wonderful wife to say, "Yeah, when would you like to go to Uganda?" So Pete Callahan was as good as his word. He took his daughter, another attorney, his grandson to Uganda in 2013. He had a road to Damascus experience. All I can tell you is that he came back from Uganda. He essentially retired from a 50-man law firm that he was the principal owner of.
Wow.
He said, "Nick, I will give you 10 years, hopefully my best 10 years. He is now the president of the board. He's the largest single donor. He's one of the most inspiring men I have ever met. He's Catholic and decided that, his armchair Catholicism was going to now become a boots on the ground, front line, living his faith. And he has truly become one of my and Michelle's best friends. We love them dearly. So I've never underestimated what can happen when somebody is sent along to us at the right timing. I just quickly tell you two other very brief stories. In 2017, I was asked to do a podcast, not unlike this one. Happened to be a gentleman called Charlie Hedges. Anyway, I'm being interviewed, 45 minutes. I think, okay, that sounded all right. And obviously it was, because 3 days later, I get a sizable check for 3 wells. In the intervening years, he's become the second largest donor. He now actually is the head and runs our operations on the ground in Uganda, and has essentially helped us create our water access, hygiene, and sanitation program. And so these are people that, candidly, I couldn't have found in a million years, but they have come to Wells of Life because they see that this is a Christian ministry that makes such a difference. 700 wells, Simon, is just a number. We all know that, there's such a need, but every well tells a story.
Yeah, that's right.
And every well is the story of a donor who has compassion, who is willing to make a difference and bring life, hope, and an opportunity to people that they may never see. But yet, through their generosity, mothers can be mothers. Children can play and splash in water and not be sick and have low-grade fevers. Girls can attend school. And the whole world opens up to that community. We lost one of our wonderful our basketball stars here a couple of years ago. Kobe Bryant was tragically taken from us in an accident. We had an opportunity and an invitation to provide and dedicate a memorial well in his memory and in his daughter Gianna's memory.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably one of the most beautiful opportunities we've ever been given. We found a school that had not received water for 50 years, if you can imagine, run by a group of nuns. This wonderful school literally drew water from a pond. We found the school, we drilled a well, we had a spectacular dedication ceremony. One of our team wore the Lakers jersey. We had a beautiful little girl called Isabel, all of about 6 years old, speak as to how important this water was to her family. And you know what it did, Simon? For a moment, it made everything so personal. It made the 9,000 miles connected. The children at that well were just as important as the children of San Juan Capistrano, Newport Beach, or California. And nobody worried about who they were, what they had, or what they'd done.
Yeah.
Humanity and the Christian ethos of being the hands and feet of Jesus in the simplest and most practical way was what Wells of Life was about, is about, and will always be about.
So what does the future of Wells of Life look like?
You know, Simon, the next decade is what I'm most excited about, because really we've built the foundation in the last decade. Yes, 700 wells. We have several programs. We drill new wells, we repair wells, we have a water access, hygiene and sanitation program. We really just share the gospel in a very simple way. And we simply offer every single well in Jesus' name. We don't discriminate. The water goes to everybody. We let everybody know why it's given and who it's given from. The next decade looks like the most exciting. We have plans to build a training and visitor center, a conference center. Of course, I will revert back to my opportunity to visit the amazing work that you did in Bujumbura. And I think there was a seed planted there as well. So we will be building a training visitor center where we can teach, and basically we can support local pastors, local priests, local ministers, to be able to do more and have more resources. And that's what we look like. I believe we could even triple or quadruple the number of wells. Tens of thousands of wells is what we are capable of, because we want to collaborate with other NGOs. Every bit of information we have that we've learned, we share for free. We want to be the inspiration behind many NGOs that puts an end to the water crisis, that creates a world where not one child has to die for lack of water, where water in Jesus' name becomes the refrain, where everybody has it on their lips here in the United States, in every school, in every church, in every business, and in every family. It's what we can do. It's how we can essentially become a one voice, share that one opportunity to solve the biggest problem right now, the lack of water. That's what Wells of Life is about. That's what we believe we're capable of doing as a global ministry in the next decade. And that's how we really believe we can share our faith in such a profound and simple way that will draw so many people to the Lord as having a personal relationship, just like me.
I love it. And, this podcast is called Inspired, and I can just hear the passion, the vision oozing out of you. And one thing that I love is that you're talking about the next decade, and we're hoping that you're going to be around for that decade, because on a serious note, you've been dealt a curveball recently. So just tell us about that.
Yes, indeed, Simon. In the latter part of 2020, which was already a fairly challenging year, as probably a lot of people know, I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. Really came out of left field. Certainly was not expecting this to be what finished off the year. However, so many things have changed in the interim months. I am been treated at the best cancer hospital in America, at Scripps MD Anderson, just down the road in La Jolla. I have the best surgeon, who is a wonderful man from South Wales. I have probably the most amazing head of radiation, who spends more time praying for me than he does talking about radiation. So go figure that. My wife is an amazing lady when it comes to researching everything that I need to know and that we need to know. So we're in full action mode. Wells of Life, we are up 37% year over year, if you can believe that.
Fantastic.
So the Lord has taken Wells of Life into the palm of his hand. He's brought people to us that honestly I couldn't have imagined, that I knew were incredible, but I didn't have the reach to get or to involve. They have willingly come. And I've just stood there oftentimes literally with tears in my eyes, because I realized, Lord, I haven't done a thing. And he basically has said, you don't need to do a thing. You need to rest in me. I got this. And I think that's a pretty amazing feeling from me telling you that I was a hard charging Irish guy with a stubborn A-type personality that really just wanted to make millions of dollars and retire early. So God did have a good laugh at that, to right now where, you know what, I don't take one single step forward without checking with the Holy Spirit. Is this where I need to be? Is this where my family needs to be? Is this where Wells of Life needs to be? And we have our biggest fundraiser of the year coming up on the 11th of November. I've set that date on my mind, in my heart, and on my wall as the date when I will give, I believe, my greatest testimony to honor God for his healing power. In addition to that, we're going to have our largest event. I believe we're going to raise over $1 million that night, just because the Lord is so generous and because we want to drill so many more wells in his name. And finally, I can just say this, Simon, and I don't say it in any way to be braggadocious. I'm saying it because it's the truth. I have no fear. I absolutely am at peace. Yes, cancer treatment is challenging and it wouldn't be something I would invite, but this is an opportunity and an experience that I can witness to my faith in front of two young teenagers, 17 and 15. I can't teach them faith out of a book, not even out of the Bible. I have to live this faith. I have to walk in these footsteps. I do it willingly because I know if I can bring one person to the Lord just because of what I do, then I'll be happy. And this will have made the difference and all of this will be worth it. So that's where I find myself right now.
Beautiful. And I have no doubt that through you, many, many, many people have come to know the Lord. So listen, last parting words, sort of key takeaways, lessons learned that you'd want to tell to your sons or the younger Nick.
Oh, the invitation, to come to the Lord is always there. And, the backdrop of our lives is always, what do you want to do that's significant? Do you want to create a simple legacy that when you're gone, people will look back on and remember? Do you want to give something that clearly you can't take with you? Are you willing to be a person of action, even if you haven't figured out the whole way through? Are you willing to just put one foot in front of the other and be that good Samaritan? It's my favorite story in the Bible because it really, really highlights how easy it is to step onto the other side of the road. I see it happening every day. I see it happening from people who are very well-to-do and very wealthy and want to tell me, I'll do it tomorrow, next week, when I retire. I got a memo that shocked me to the core that basically said, what, Nick, you're not guaranteed tomorrow. My takeaway is this: love today, share your mission and your faith today, and just be the best person you can be. And don't worry about perfection. That's a misnomer. Just being as good as you can be, loving as many people as possible. Most of all, love the Lord. Second of all, love your wife, do what she tells you. And then just inspire your kids to be there for them. Don't preach to them, because I cannot preach to teenagers, but I know this. I can go and take them for a cup of coffee or a cup of something else and listen. So the big takeaway for me is maybe listen and hear that still voice that says to you, bring them water or do something else, because that voice is waiting to speak into your ear if you give it an opportunity. It's waiting.
Thanks, Nick. So are we listening? Can we hear that voice? And will we respond? That's the big challenge, isn't it? Listen, everybody, that's the end of Inspired this week. It's been with Nick Jordan. Nick, people can get in touch with you, can sort of get interested in the work at wellsoflife.org. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I always do this, Simon. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. Two things. We obviously, like everybody, have a website, and it's very easy. It's wellsoflife.org. I do something that probably shocks a lot of people. I give out my personal cell phone. If you want to hear more about Wells of Life, or if you just want to have a chat, I'm here for you. 949-584-6166. If you're obviously outside of the US, you probably want to stick a 001 in front of that. Promise you leave a message. I'll be happy to answer. If there's anybody there that I can in any way help with what I've been through by sharing a story or just maybe listening to you, I'm at your disposal. I'm happy to help in any way, and I would love to talk with you.
Thanks, Nick. Brilliant. Okay, well, we'll be back next week with another superb guest. So if you've been inspired, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes. You can get in touch with me on any of the social media platforms or simongilbo.com. Please gossip the news around. They're just great stories to stir faith from people in different industries, different sort of directions in life. So please join us again next week. Thanks, Nick. God bless you, bro.
Thank you, Simon. Enjoyed every moment of it. Good luck to you.
Cheers. Bye.